Okay, let's dive right into this. Imagine the absolute perfect getaway, right? You've got a quiet cabin nestled deep in the trees, maybe a sleek, modern desert oasis, literally miles away from all the noise and stress of the city. Honestly, there is something just incredibly peaceful about renting an isolated house out in the middle of nowhere. Well, that is until you realize that being hours away from civilization actually means you're hours away from help. Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're taking a hard look at the dark side of the short-term rental boom. We're going to examine the genuinely terrifying realities of staying in strangers' homes way off the grid. So maybe turn the lights down, definitely check your locks, and let's get into it. So, what happens when the ultimate private getaway actually becomes a trap? You know, it's a question we almost never ask ourselves when we're excitedly booking that picturesque weekend retreat. But to truly wrap our heads around just how vulnerable you are in these super isolated locations, we're going to examine 3 deeply unsettling, fully documented true stories. Each one really peels back a different layer of the danger you expose yourself to when renting an isolated home. We're going to break down the timelines, the red flags, and the absolutely terrifying outcomes of every single scenario. Now, what's really interesting about this is the ultimate cognitive dissonance we all have as modern travelers. I mean, we book these places specifically craving peaceful nature, total relaxation, and ultimate privacy. We want to be entirely alone. But here's the catch. That exact privacy, it's exactly what creates severe vulnerability. When you've got 0 cell service and you're literally hours from the nearest law enforcement dispatch, wow, the fantasy of a remote vacation just shatters the second things go wrong. Because out there, you are entirely on your own. All right, to really understand how fast things can escalate, we are starting with threat 1, the inside threat. This first incident went down in a super secluded mountain home up in the Adirondacks. Gorgeous cabin for sure, but a really clear timeline of escalating red flags popped up almost immediately. So on day 1, the renter is out on a jog and gets that intense primal feeling of being watched. But you know how human brains work, they just brush it off as sitting anxiety. Later on, they start hearing weird noises inside, just little thumps and ticks. Again, they just blame it on the old wooden cabin settling. Typical, right? But by 10:45 p.m., this sort of subconscious dread takes over, and they end up checking the locks 3 separate times before bed. Then comes midnight. They head down to the back deck for a quick smoke, and the whole illusion of safety just vanishes. Because standing there in the dark dining room, they see a huge shadow blocking the moonlight coming from the kitchen. They flick on the light, and boom. Standing right there is a 6-foot-tall man with long shaggy hair and a thick beard. What followed was a totally terrifying 15-second standoff. Out of nowhere, the man just lunges at the renter in a full-on sprint. Thankfully, a kitchen counter provided just enough of a barrier for the renter to sprint back to their bedroom, lock the door, and dive into the closet to hide. So picture this. She's in there desperately calling 911, just listening as this guy violently beats on the bedroom door. And the craziest part? He would bizarrely scream that he loved her and that he had changed, completely ignoring her terrified cries that he had the completely wrong woman. The sheer physical force of his attack was so intense that his actual fist started penetrating right through the solid wood of the door. Literally, just as the intruder's entire hand broke through the door, police sirens wailed outside and officers crashed in to tackle him. But guys, the aftermath? That is what makes this case truly horrifying. The identity of the attacker turned out to be the host's ex-fiancé, who supposedly went off the grid. And get this, he hadn't just broken in that night. No way. He had actually been secretly living inside one of the house's closets for days. When police searched it, they found him set up with beer cans, snack foods, and a kitchen knife. All that time, the renters spent triple-checking those exterior locks, totally useless. The threat was already inside with them the whole time. So the Adirondacks case is just a terrifying masterclass in internal vulnerability. It really forces us to reevaluate our immediate surroundings, right? But it also leads us to a new, maybe even scarier question. What if you meticulously check the house? What if you know for an absolute fact that the interior is totally clear, but the threat isn't lurking in the woods? What if it's right outside your window? Let's move to our next category and see how this builds. This is threat 2, the perimeter threat. For this case, we're trading the deep woods for a super modern, highly isolated Airbnb right out in the Palm Springs desert. And just like our first story, we see this really progressive escalation of ignored warnings. Nights 1 and 2, the couple hears small thumps, random ticks, even a distant voice out in the darkness. But again, psychology takes the wheel. They explain it all away as the house settling or just the desert wind rattling the fence. But pay attention to night 3. Right at midnight, a motion light flicks on in the backyard. Okay, a minute later at 12:01, a second light triggers, literally tracing a path like someone is actively pacing around the exterior of the house. The narrator is now totally convinced someone is trying to break in, so they quietly grab a kitchen knife, slide open the back door, and instantly spot fresh shoe prints in the sand, prints that lead straight over to a small storage shed. The tension here is just palpable. The narrator slowly follows those footprints right up to the shed doors. They're standing maybe 3 or 4 feet away, just listening in dead silence for any breathing or movement. After 5 agonizing seconds of absolute quiet, a man's voice speaks from inside the pitch-black shed, calmly asking, "Excuse me, could you open the door, please?" Followed by a quiet, incredibly creepy laugh. I mean, no way. The narrator didn't hesitate for a second. They turned, sprinted straight back into the house, locked the sliding door, and immediately called 911. And this brilliantly illustrates the stealth nature of this kind of threat. While they were waiting for the cops, the couple just watched in pure horror as the motion lights kept triggering around the house. The intruder was literally circling them. When the police finally arrived, they found the shed empty, but it was absolutely filled with water bottles and food wrappers. Undeniable proof someone had set up camp in there. But honestly, it's the final detail that is the true nightmare here. One of the officers actually found a dirty baseball hat shoved behind the couch inside the main house. A hat the couple knew for a fact was not there before. Which meant the intruder hadn't just been in the yard. He had been inside the house at some point, potentially standing right over them while they slept. Our first 2 cases dealt with hidden, stealthy dangers. But what happens when the threat drops the act entirely? Let's look at threat 3. The breach. This final incident involves Anna, her brother Hunter, and the narrator, who all went in on a cheap spring break cabin way deep in the woods. I mean, the isolation was total. You couldn't even see the main road from the front porch. When they first got there, they did notice a shiny new padlock on a little outbuilding, but honestly, they thought nothing of it. But here is the crucial sensory detail that kicks off the terror. Middle of the night, the narrator wakes up to a distinct sound hitting the side of the cabin. They grab a flashlight, look out the window, and see fresh footprints in the mud right near that padlocked outbuilding. And here's the catch. It had just been raining, and absolutely no one from their group had stepped outside since the storm started. Those footprints were brand new. Someone was out there in the dark. Then, at 4 a.m., the whole stealth approach goes right out the window. The narrator wakes up to this incredibly loud, aggressive knocking on the front door. The guy on the other side is shouting, claiming he's a forest ranger conducting a welfare check. So the crucial point here is how the illusion of safety shatters when an aggressive external force demands entry. It's a classic, terrifying tactic, preying on our natural instinct to just comply with authority figures. Fortunately, the group's survival instincts kicked into high gear, essentially creating a rapid-fire survival checklist in real time. Step 1, the narrator gets instantly suspicious, completely refuses to open the door, and yells out that they don't need any help. Step 2, while this fake ranger starts demanding to ask questions, Hunter quietly slips away and calls the real police, verifying that nope, absolutely no rangers have been dispatched to the remote area. Step 3, things go critical. Being told no completely enrages the guy outside. He starts threatening to kick the heavy wooden door down and arrest them. As Anna screams at him to back off, the man stomps around the porch, and suddenly a rock shatters the cabin window into a million pieces. The group just grabs kitchen knives, tracking his heavy footsteps around the perimeter, fully prepared for a fight to the death, until finally, distant sirens scare the man off into the trees. The police eventually showed up and searched the property, but the guy had completely vanished into the deep woods. They told the group to pack their bags and get out of there immediately. But it was only later, on the long drive home, when the adrenaline finally wore off, that the most chilling realization hit them. Think about it. For an attacker to even know about a cabin that completely hidden from the road, this couldn't have been some random crime of opportunity. It had to be planned. Someone knew they were out there, entirely on their own. All of these stories paint a pretty unsettling picture of modern travel. Which brings us to the overarching lesson of this explainer. You are never alone. Look, disappearing into the woods for a weekend sounds like an absolute dream, right? But complete isolation strips away all those invisible safety nets we totally take for granted. So let's recap the threat matrix we've explored today. First off, our brains are wired to desperately normalize fear. We brush off footsteps, ticks, and thumps as the house settling or just the wind. But as we saw, those quote-unquote normal sounds often mask immediate, real danger. Second, and this is absolutely crucial, isolation dictates that you are your own first responder.
When police are a 30-minute drive away, a locked door is just a delay tactic. It is not a solution. And third, exterior locks cannot protect you from a threat that has already breached your perimeter, or worse, is literally already living inside the bedroom closet.
I want you to just ground yourself for a second here. Think about the very last time you took a trip to just get away from it all. Think about the last time you pulled up to an isolated cabin, maybe a remote desert house, or some cool off-the-grid rental. Think about that exact moment you brought your bags inside, closed the heavy front door, and turned the deadbolt, feeling completely 100% secure in your private little getaway. After looking at everything we've covered in this explainer today, you really have to stop and ask yourself, when you turn that lock, in a house you don't really know, in a place hours away from help, are you actually locking the danger out? Or are you just locking yourself in with it? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, guys. Stay safe out there.